Syndrome. Okay, let's formally start the meeting. This is Glenn Richards for the Newburyport Historical Commission, and welcome to the meeting of Thursday, the 8th of April, 2021. Um, we'll do a roll call to see which of the commissioners are here, although I can see most of them on the Zoom screen. And I'll start now. Mr. Sendrone, I'm not seeing you, and it looks like he's not here yet, so we'll see if he turns up in the next several seconds. Mr. Christopher Fay, you are here?
Here.
Okay. Mr. Peter McNamee?
Here.
Okay. Joe Morgan?
Here.
And Glenn Richards, the chair, is here. Oh, and there, Mark Sandrone. Okay, you were alphabetically first, but I see you now joined. Can you check your audio and report that
I'm
you're
here.
in?
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you. So we have 6 members present. There's more than adequate quorum, so we will have a legal meeting tonight. Commissioners Carnwath and Pecknick are absent tonight. Also on the call are Andy Port, City Planner Caitlin Sullivan, and Gretchen Joy taking minutes. For most of the meeting, the rules, for those of you who've been here before, this should be familiar, but if you're not, only the commissioners will have the audio enabled. We will allow one member of the public at a time to be unmuted during a public hearing period, if there are any. Also, applicants or the representatives will be unmuted during their presentation times. And again, after any public comment period, so they can respond to comments as appropriate. Now, if there is a public comment period, which will be obvious, and you wish to make a comment, you can use, well, you can't, not only can, but you must use the Zoom feature, raising your hand virtually, of course. It's a control on the Zoom application to raise your hand. That's how we know that you wish to speak, and we can unmute your audio on our end, and you will also need to unmute your audio on your end for us to hear you. And so we'll do that. If you happen to have called in on a telephone line, *9 is the command to raise a hand or lower it, and *6 is to unmute or mute. And also remember to lower your hand after you've been recognized. And commissioners, just a reminder, if you're making or seconding a motion, do include your name with that, so it makes it easier for the minute taker to have a note of who exactly did what or made what motions. Okay, so we'll get to the agenda. The first item is revisiting one that was continued from our last meeting, and that's a demolition delay application for 29 Harding Avenue. The applicant is seeking a determination of historical significance only, meaning that they do not have any formal demo or rebuild plan at this point. They basically want a demolition permit. So let me begin by clarifying something about this step of the process, because the ordinance can be a little tricky, and I know a lot of people have struggled to understand this, myself included. It's called step 1 and step 2, but and it calls for 2 votes by the commission. The first one being whether or not it's historically significant. But it's a little bit more complex than that, because there are 2 flavors, if you will, of historical significance. It can be deemed by the commission to be historically significant, but not considered for preservation, in which case they are allowed to get a demo permit. Or it can be deemed historically significant and considered for preservation, which means a public hearing is triggered, which just in this case wouldn't be tonight, because I don't think the applicant hasn't applied for that yet, so that wouldn't be tonight in this particular case. Often in other cases, it might be the same night. And the public hearing is on the demo plan and rebuild plans and all that. If it's deemed to be not historically significant, then that's the simplest case. That's the end of the story. They can, excuse me, they can get a demolition permit, and that's the last this commission deals with that particular structure or property. So let me pause right there. Fellow commissioners, is that clear to everybody, or any questions on that, or shall we go plow right ahead.
Makes sense?
Clear.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is, I see, I saw here that Nat Norton is on board, and it looks like he's unmuted. The but and so Nat, we'll let you address this, but before I do that, I should probably say a few words about the site visit. Myself and a couple other members of the commission did a site visit on March 29th, and we took a look at the property to try to determine or make a better determination about its provenance, its history, how old it may or may not be, what the status of the various additions are, and so on. And I will allow other commissioners that have any comments to make on that to also speak. I can tell you that the way I would summarize what I saw is that if you're looking at what we're showing on the screen right now, the main picture in sort of in the upper right quadrant. That main body of the house that is to the left of that door with the 12 panes of glass on it, but you can see there's a fairly small cabin sized structure. And that one appears to be late 19th century. I'd say, who knows exactly when, but not real old, but old enough certainly to be historically significant, but also not really, didn't strike me as something that was constructed to be a permanent dwelling, or by permanent meaning, something that was built to substantial standards. Certainly the framing and the construction techniques that were employed are far below the current structural code standards. And even notwithstanding that, and I think the idea that it was originally built as a cabin out on Plum Island and was moved to this location in the late 40s when that subdevelopment or subdivision was developed, and also the wildlife refuge was established on Plum Island. They had to move whatever camps were out there, had to be moved out. I think that's a pretty likely scenario. And then to the right of that, you can see there's a large garage that extends quite a bit. On the lower left picture, you can see it goes quite a ways back. That's sitting on a concrete slab. That's all relatively new, what you might call intrusive additions and so on. One thing I thought was rather interesting, and it's not shown in these photos, is on the back side, there was some very interesting, what you might call folk art. That's probably someone who lived there did very much maritime oriented models of ships and scenes of maritime things and whatnot. So that I found was rather interesting. Okay, so having said that, I think I know Chris was there, Patricia was there, but she's not here tonight. Chris, any other comment that you want to make as far as that site visit?
Yeah, I mean, initially when I looked at this before it was presented last time, I didn't really think much of it. I think Patricia's research swayed me a little bit, and then I went inside the house, and I've been thinking about it, and it's a nice story, I guess. It's maybe a way I would put it, about maybe moving this from Plum Island here. Somebody chose to live in it, clearly, but I just, having gone inside and looking at the disrepair in there, and being actually, I'll be honest with you, disturbed by the fact that people lived in that building for however number of years.
Yeah.
And that, under those conditions, my initial thought was, it's a big lot. Why not move it back? Why not make it keep it as part of the property? And then I thought more about it, and then the cost to have to move it. I know this isn't necessarily our purview, but this is
Right.
where I'm thinking about the cost of having to move it, the cost of having to maybe certainly rehab it so it would be inhabitable by somebody as a guest house or whatever, to me is not, it's just not realistic. So
Yeah.
those are my impressions. I hate to see it disappear for historical reasons, but I don't really see much other for it.
Right. Thanks, Chris. And I didn't mention the interior. We did look at the interior, and I cannot disagree with Chris's comments. The condition was poor, to put it mildly. It was very much had been neglected for a while, and yeah, it was so the structural deficiencies I mentioned were actually kind of only made worse by the condition. All right. So having said all that, Nat, do you want to have anything to say towards before we take a vote on the historical significance and whether or not it's to be considered for preservation?
No, I think I presented you on the 25th with everything I had there. And I think you kind of characterized by seeing it with your own eyes, the condition and the maybe
Right.
usefulness of the home. So I don't think I have anything else to add.
Okay, thank you. And do you agree or disagree with what Mr. Fay and myself have reported from as far as our observations? That was a question for you, Nat. Do you think our comments were fair?
Oh, that was to me. I apologize.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think they were fair. Yeah, you got a good
Okay.
assessment of it.
Okay. Well, so for this first part now, usually there's no requirement for a public comment period. I know that there were a couple interested parties, shall we say, who were on that site visit as well. And so I'll just allow a very brief public comment period if anyone from the public has just a brief comment to make. And I do see a hand. Caitlin or Andy, can you take care of the various unmuting? Maybe we can start with, it looks like Mr. Calder-John was the first to raise a hand.
Go right ahead if you were able to unmute.
Yeah, Tom.
Your mic appears unmuted, Tom, but we're not hearing you, just so you know.
Didn't Tom have this problem once before?
I think at the last meeting, perhaps.
Yeah.
Similar, maybe connection issue.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Tom Calder-John, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. It was a very disappointing visit in terms of the house itself. From the outside, it looked like an easy solution was possible. It was good to be invited, however, and I do appreciate it. Some very salvageable items like the kitchen from the 1930s should be considered by the owner. There's not much to distinguish this building. Framing could be anywhere between 1870 into the 1930s. The oldest framing members were slightly off dimension and not modern. They used 2x6s slightly under dimension. Unfortunately, they cut a huge hole in the earlier in the front section, probably to drop in a heating system. They then proceeded to patch the hole with undersized lumber and then poorly sistered them together. So there's a huge weak area in the middle. It's doubtful the house would survive a move without reframing the whole thing after gutting it and cutting off the rear portion and the garage. I saw only one likely Victorian window, but it could have easily been salvaged from someplace else, or it could be original. The roof framing is only 2x4s. That's real dimension, not modern. And the middle of the ridge, however, is compromised. The rafters are widely spaced. It would be a bit scary in a heavy snow load without shoveling the roof. Even moving this as a shed or some sort of outbuilding would be tough. Nothing like doors or beadboard or anything gives us much of a clue as to its age. It could have easily been a summer camp, but when?
Yeah.
Even reviewing as various histories of yard lumber sizes does not help. Then if you throw in all the mills that used to be around our area, the problem gets more difficult. I used to have lumber milled to any size locally at Bartlett's in New Hampshire, and the one in Groveland, only Bartlett's is left. Linda Miller and I think the building is not worth saving. Neither of us could definitively date the building. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Tom. But your comments are helpful. Okay, I don't see anyone else. Don't forget to put your hand down, Tom. Okay, so we will formally close the that period where public comments allowed. Is there someone who would care to, well, let me rephrase that. The chair would love to entertain a motion to, well, it could be either of two things, a motion that it is historically significant, well, but not considered for preservation, or if you feel that it should be, all motions are made in the affirmative. So even if, so if you think it's, how do I phrase this? It's historically significant, but not considered for preservation. Well, I guess then that could be the motion too. That's still an affirmative motion. Or anyone, the third option is that it's not historically significant. I'll entertain any one of those three.
This is Joe. I move to affirm that the building is 29 Harding Avenue is historically significant, but need not be considered for preservation.
Okay, so the motion is that it's historically significant, but not considered for preservation. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Chris. I will second that.
Okay. Okay, so that's the motion on the floor. I'll go around the roll call here. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you. And the chair will go along with that as well. So what this means for you, Nat, is that you will be allowed to get a demolition permit, and you will not need to come back before this board in the future. One last thing, though, if you would you consider allowing me to take some photographs of those that what I refer to as folk art in the back. I think some of the historical societies or the Museum of Old Newbury there, something, just might be interested in that. I think it's interesting enough and unusual enough to at least have a record of that. Would you be amenable to that?
Certainly, I'd welcome that. I took a number of pictures myself and thinking about how to repurpose that folk art. So
Right.
If somebody that would have more appreciation than I could make use of it, I'd welcome that.
Okay, thanks. I'll get in touch with you outside this meeting to try to arrange something. So thanks very much, Mr. Norton.
Okay.
You're all set.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
You're welcome. Okay, the next item on the agenda refers to 14 Highland Avenue, also a demo delay permit application. Just give me a second here to get a few notes together. And I believe we have, I see Lisa Mead and the attendees. I believe she'll be presenting for the applicant or owner. So a similar case, well, actually, it's a similar case only in that it's a demo delay, DCOD demo delay application, but it's rather different in that in this case we have a viable lived-in structure that they want to expand. So I understand, first of all, Ms. Mead, are you there?
I am present. Yes, thank you. And Eileen Graff is with me also this evening.
Okay, so I see you have a presentation. You want to go through that for the first part of this determination as far as historical significance and preservation and all that?
Yes, thank you. And
Yep.
we are here only for the demolition permit. This is not in the DCOD. So this property is at 14 Highland Avenue, and I represent Michael and Lydia Randall, who are the purchasers of the property. They don't yet own it, but they are the buyers of the property. And our first request is for the board to determine whether or not it's historically significant, and if you so determine, whether it be preferably preserved. The Randalls seek to remove a later added rear second floor and construct a new 2.5 story on top of the existing floor. If you go to the next slide, please. So as the commission is aware, it is charged with reviewing applications and proposing to demolish structures that are older than 75 years. The purpose of such review under the ordinance is to, quote, protect and preserve structures in the city that reflect distinctive features of the architectural, cultural, political, economic, or social history of Newburyport. This side of Highland Avenue was created around 1929 by a subdivision of James L. Hartnett. This lot was deeded out in 1939, and for the first time, the deed includes a building thereon. So we date this house to approximately 1939, and therefore the structure is over 75 years old. This structure has been remodeled on numerous occasions. At one time, perhaps it resembled a cottage style home, but over the years it has had several additions. Most notably, a second floor was added only to the rear of the structure, and the dormers are added to the north side of the structure. Unlike the remaining homes on the south and immediately to the north on Highland Avenue, where the ridges run parallel, which I'm going to show you in a minute, with Highland Avenue, this structure, the ridge runs perpendicular to Highland Avenue. It's unclear what style the original structure resembled. Further, the current home has a ceiling height of 6 feet at the highest point on the front part of the house, with a dormer at 5 feet. Both the height and the stairway are inadequate up into the second floor. There's a chimney on the house, which was clearly later added as it exceeds the height of the second story added to the rear. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here's the site plan. You can see the house is in the middle, obviously, and there's no proposal to change the footprint of the house. The proposal is to remove that roof line and reconstruct a 2.5 story. If we go to the next slide, please. So I think these line drawings, and Eileen can talk a little bit about what she has found when she's been there. You know, I like in the ones, the side elevations on the top left, excuse me, top right and bottom right, kind of looks like a train engine because of the way they've added this addition on the back, and the chimney looks kind of like the steam pipe coming up off the train. So you can see that there's been this weird addition on the back, these dormers added to the right, the north side, but certainly not to the south side. And then you can see the front and the rear of these elevations. Eileen, did you have anything to add to this particular slide about the current condition of the structure?
I can add that. Well, what I was going to say is that, you know, it clearly the original, I'll call it a cottage, you know, was the original form. And really at the time when they added the rear addition, you know, going higher than the existing cottage and adding those dormers, that really there's sort of this awkwardness of the two meeting together. And I'll just bring up things like the dash line, the awkwardness of ceiling and floor heights that exist within. The top right drawing has some dashed lines, and that's trying to represent the various floor systems that are in there. And as Lisa mentioned, the ceiling height of the second floor of the original cottage is 6 feet, and I, at all of 5'3", really can feel that constraint and that roof coming down on you. It's very low. So anyway, if that's what you meant, Lisa, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
This is Glenn. Could I, while we were still on this slide, I had some questions, and you've partly answered them, Eileen, about the dashed lines.
Yeah.
So do you mind if I just want to clarify something on these? Okay. Okay, the upper right one, there are 2 parallel dashed lines on the right-hand side. That's the rear of the house. What do those 2 represent exactly?
Sure. So those represent the floor system that's between the first and second floor within that rear addition. So that helps me when I build the drawing. On the single line that you see in the original section, that's the ceiling height of the original cottage, and you can't see the floor system because it happens to fall on the same line as the eave line.
Right.
But so does that help answer it?
So what? Well, partly. I understand the ceiling height on the left. So okay, so is the lower of the 2 lines on the right is the ceiling, and the higher one is the floor?
Correct. And you
I
can
see.
somewhat see that in the representation of the windows. So that in the rear part, you could see on the first level how it's squattier than the 2 that are in the original structure. And that's because of the lack of ceiling height in comparison to the original. Yeah.
Okay, not quite done yet. Andy, could you zoom in on the upper left picture? Yeah, because there were, this one had me confused. Maybe that, for example, you've got a bunch of dimensions, heights there. The 2 topmost ones appear to be labeled the same. T.O, which I don't.
Sorry.
What
Yes.
what is TO?
Top of second
okay.
floor ceiling. Apologies. I see that I have an edit there that I did not do. But what I do there is I am, again, in building the drawing, I'm creating what was the marker for the ceiling height at the second floor. And you could see that at the dash line in the gable end of the original. And then the next line down, sorry for the lack of the edit, I apologize on that,
Okay.
but that's marking the top of the dormer. So again, building the drawing, rebuilding the building in drawing form, I'm measuring the top of wall at the dormer height, at the dormer edge. So that, ended up at 5 feet at the outer limits as you walk towards the exterior windows.
Okay, and those dashed lines around that window on the second floor there, do those represent interior walls or anything, or is that just something that you put into assist you?
Exactly. It represents both the ceiling height is the top horizontal line,
Right.
and the vertical ones are the 5 foot marker, helping me understand how much volume is in there.
Okay. All right. And I'm just guessing there might be knee walls or whatever, but that's irrelevant right now.
Right.
Okay. And so the floor of the second floor is a different level, obviously, in the front part of the house to the rear part of the house, correct?
That's correct.
We saw that with those in the
side elevation.
So they just have a step there, or?
It's a really awkward transition. Like Andy, if you don't mind sliding over to the right, just so we could think about it as we move, yes, through the building. So if you can imagine standing right above the middle window of the middle, right? When one walks from that section of the original into the addition on the rear, you can see there are steps going down. And if you can imagine also, yet you're still underneath the low roof. So there's this sort of awkwardness in the transition getting from the second floor of the original to the new. And I'm sure that's why they dropped the ceiling height in the addition so that they could get into this second floor space from the original. But nonetheless, it presents itself as a very awkward transition.
Okay, and hopefully this is my last question on this. It seems a bit odd, it strikes me as a bit odd that in the presumably newer addition, they have the ceiling height of the first floor quite a bit lower than,
Lower.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the height of that? Do you know offhand?
So the original was, I believe it was 8'10".
Yeah, that sounds right.
Right. And then the new was, sorry, let me see here. 7 foot,
Okay,
7'2".
okay. All right. Thank you for some of that clarification. It's quite the puzzle here. Okay, please continue your
No
presentation.
doubt it's a quirky addition on the back.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry for the interruption.
No, I think those were all very good questions. Thank you. So the next slide, please, slide 5. So we wanted to show obviously the photos of the building in the neighborhood. And, you know, I would have, you know, clearly there is a consistency in this neighborhood as you move down the street towards Toppins Lane. There's no question about that. But this house is different than all of those because of what occurred to it or what has occurred to it. So here's a side view of it without the dormers, and you can see the addition on the back with the chimney. And if you can go to the next slide, please. And here's from the opposite direction. And you can see the dormers where the dormers were added. And the next slide, please. And again, this is just a little more up close to see what the renovation was. And the next slide, please. And then again, this is the close up of the side where the dormers and the addition are. And the next slide, please. And then this is a head-on photograph of the house. So while because of age, this house may meet the definition of historically significant. You can go to the next slide, please, Andy, and just leave it there. The applicant requests that because of what has occurred to the house in the past, that it not be preferably preserved. And I would remind the commission that our request before you is to remove the roof, not remove the entire house. We're not seeking to demolish the entire house. We're seeking to remove the roof and put an addition on top of the house and to clean up the lines. So I will stop there before we go on to the rest of our presentation because it may or may not be necessary. And I know from past experience, the board would like to take these considerations and questions one at a time.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Attorney Mead. Let me pause for just a second. And Andy, I wonder if you could refresh both my memory and just make sure everyone on the commission understands, because we do have a couple of new members. I do see on the map that this is just outside the DCOD district. So can you just tell us what, if anything, that actually means in terms of what the role and jurisdiction, if you will, of the commission is in this particular case?
So it's the full demolition delay ordinance. The Zoning Board of Appeals has no jurisdiction on, for the demolition control overlay district terms that would typically trigger a review by them.
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, just to just so the board knows, sometimes I say this in the beginning, this project, however, does require zoning board review for a special permit for nonconformities. Right. So while it does not require zoning board review under the DCOD, as Andy has stated, right, it does require review for special permit for nonconformities.
Right, for all the upward extensions and all that.
And I concur with that as well. Yep.
Okay, all right, that's very, very typical. So hopefully everyone sort of understood that. So so the Historical Commission is sort of the governing body, so to speak, in determining the fate of this particular structure here. So does anyone on the panel have a question for the applicant or their attorney, or any comments? just thinking I know there are a number of attendees in the on the meeting. There have been a number of letters received, a couple of pro, several opposed to the project. It's kind of an awkward position in that the first step of the determination is whether it's even historically significant or not, and considered for preservation. So, and that's normally what we do first, and then do or don't go on after that. And as with the one before, I can have public comment, but it's not legally required until we have actually a demo plan review, which I assume the applicant is prepared to do if we go to that stage. Can I get a sense from my commissioners if people are feeling that this should be considered for preservation? Anyone? Joe, yeah, Joe, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes, I think we should have that discussion. I think by definition, it's an historical structure, but I do think we need to have the discussion whether it should be preserved and whether it's preferably preserved. Yes.
All right. Yeah, I think that it's an important discussion as well. Mrs. Mark, did you also have a comment?
That's basically what I was going to ask also.
Okay. All right, then given, and this is not terribly unusual, we've done this many times before, to help us out in making that determination, have allowed members of the public to weigh in on that. Again, I will open a brief public comment period. Please limit yourself to 2 minutes. We'll try to time that. And if you want to make a comment, please raise your hand and using the Zoom function. The moderator will unmute you as needed, and then you'll need to unmute yourself as well, and just state your name and address, and we'll let it go from there. So, is there anyone who would like to make a comment?
And I would also note that we have, I think, one caller for calling in. You can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute, I believe. So in case that person's interested.
Okay. Okay. Looks like we have a hand there, Mr. Vardabedian.
Hi, my name is Erica Vardabedian, and Jake, my husband, and I live at 12 Highland Ave. We are direct abutters to the property in question. And we'd like to thank you for considering our concerns at the meeting tonight. We're actually here to express our objection to the current plans on file for the demolition and reconstruction of 14 Highland Ave. We feel that the dramatic scale and scope and size of the proposed new structure are too large and completely out of sync with the historic character of the houses on the north side of Highland Ave. We submitted some photos in the neighborhood that we feel give a better representation of this historic character that we're really trying to preserve. And it's the grouping of 6 bungalow-style homes that make this a unique streetscape. I'd like to point out the medical building at 18 Highland Ave. When that was converted from a residential property to its current use, care was taken to make sure that the new look reflected the historical architecture of the rest of the neighborhood. They maintained the original roof line and facade to ensure that it blended in with the other homes. It's also noted in the application that it's unclear whether the style of 14 Highland what it could be because it has a perpendicular roof line. We did submit some photos of houses, bungalows that are depicted with a perpendicular roof line. An important part of what makes our neighborhood so special is this continuity of bungalow style homes that line the north side of Highland Ave. We are one of the gateway access roads to Anna Jake's Hospital, which is the host to many people from outside the area, making us really one of Newburyport's public-facing neighborhoods, highlighting the preservation of historical architecture. It is a disappointment that the current plans for 14 Highland Ave include no reference to that bungalow style, which is predominant on our street. In conclusion, it's our hope that the applicants would reconsider and amend their plans to represent a project more reflective of the historic value of our neighborhood, as well as respecting the neighbors' ability to maintain our property's character.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, shall we, next one I see is Mr. Amos. Wait, Amos, you want to? Oh, looks like, okay, yep, you've been unmuted, Mr. Amos, so why don't you go ahead?
My name is Wade Amos. I'm here with Jennifer Davis. We live at 6 Highland Avenue, so we're 2 houses down from 14 Highland Ave. The numbers are not sequential. So well, we have a similar concern with upsetting the historic nature of the neighborhood. One of the reasons we moved here is because of the historic character of the street and the neighborhood. And one thing that I'd like to point out is if you go back to the picture that looks straight onto the house, even though that extension was added on the back from the street level, you really do not notice that additional second story. It still looks mostly like the original bungalow style, unless you actually look at it sideways from, for example, one of our houses. So we think that, you know, we have concerns with upsetting the character of the neighborhood with a major modification of this house.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you for keeping it brief. Okay, you want to?
The next person we have is Dan L.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great, thank you. Yeah, my name's Dan Lambert. I live at 2 Highland Ave with my wife and 2 children. My family's the 6th family to own our home since it was constructed in 1928. And it was fortunate that each resident of our house has passed down a house book that has conveyed decades of history of our home and our neighborhood through pictures and anecdotes over the past century. And, you know, as you make your way up the hill from Highland, mine's at the bottom of the hill, you know, you can see a distinct pattern of architecture, almost 100 years old. And my home was described as an arts and craft bungalow style. You know, these aren't the magnificent Federalist style houses you'll find on High Street, but these are real middle class, working class homes that were built in a certain way in the early 20th century. And I believe they do possess historic elements, and they do form a common design or streetscape on our side of the road. And that's really withstood the test of time. So looking up the street today, it's still like a snapshot from the 30s. So, you know, what I agree with the others where, you know, the residents on this side are all in a similar pattern. They conform to a certain roof line. And so we do appreciate the Historical Commission's considerations of how these residents conform to that design. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else? I'm not seeing any hands. Give it just another second, and if not, okay, so then we'll close the public comment period. Andy, maybe it would be helpful to, if you have it handy, to show some of the neighborhood pictures. You know, I've often walked up that hill from Toppins, because I live over on Kent Street, and to walk up to the hospital, and I believe me, I've actually noticed that streetscape, particularly the brick house to the right of the subject property here. Charming little house. So there's some more of these. You can, particularly down, yeah. So it's a little bit hard to see that this closest building on the left here is a little larger, and I wouldn't really call that a bungalow style, but you can see going down, there's the White House is the subject property, then the brick house, and you can see 2 more houses beyond that are that sort of 1.5 story, I guess you'd call them, you know, kind of bungalow or quasi bungalow style homes. Yeah, it is kind of a picture of early 20th century. Well, I'm not sure it was suburbia back then, but anyway. Okay. Thank you.
Could I add something for a second?
Yeah.
So as I commented earlier, and nobody could deny the unique nature of the houses along this street. The question before the board happens to be with this particular house at this particular time for this particular question. And if the board is in agreement, again, I don't know that anybody could deny the historical significance given the fact that it's 75 years or older. It's just the way it is. But that given what has occurred to this house, that it not be preferably preserved. And certainly the Zoning Board of Appeals, based upon their review of their criteria under special permits for nonconformities, and whether or not the proposed impact and design meets, a various number of things, the architecture, the size, the scale of the neighborhood. That's a review that they would have if this board were to determine that the house, and when I say the house, I remind the board that we're not seeking to demolish the entire house. This is essentially a roof line change. And that's what's being sought. So I want to remind the board, when nobody's seeking to take down the entire house.
Yep.
So I want to remind the board of that because nobody is proposing to remove the houses as we move down the street. The applicant is proposing to renovate this house and to have the zoning board do its job. And have this commission determine whether or not it should be preferably preserved.
Okay, thanks. And you have reminded me of a good point. A number of abutters have raised concerns that are really outside the scope of what the Historical Commission is involved with in terms of, for example, there was an abutter that had an issue around where the property line was or was not, and so on. That's not something that the Historic Commission is directly involved in, but so that's a matter that you could certainly talk to the staff at the planning office and see what the best way is to resolve the potential conflict there on the where the lot line is, or other concerns about if you feel that let's say that the upward extension of this house, which is something that the zone or the setbacks, whatever that the ZBA is going to address, if you would like the zoning board to know that your feelings about the impact on the neighborhood, that is certainly an appropriate place to do that. And I would encourage you, if you have those opinions, to address those to the ZBA at the appropriate meeting. Okay, so let me turn back to my fellow panelists here. Does anyone have a comment, opinion, or question? Any of the above?
Yeah, Glenn, this is Chris. I think it's clear that this is historically significant and should be preserved, preferably whatever we're calling it. So that's just my opinion. We do have to take the house in toto, and we can't sort of separate the pieces, right? I think we're aware of that. So if we take the structure as a whole, despite what had been added, ironically, we're now arguing that I guess the dormers have created a sort of Frankenstein type of house with additions that had taken place. I have to imagine 2 weeks from now, I'll be arguing that the dormers are necessary on a different type of property. It's like, it's crazy. It's crazy. So, but I think that given the age of the structure and the character of the neighborhood, I myself have walked up many times and thought, aren't those cute little houses? And they are fairly unique, I think, in that I don't think we have a lot of these types of 1920s, and I think they are suburban homes. The sort of first types of suburban homes in this country, as far as I know. So I think that this house should be considered for preservation, and then we'll work from there.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And Joe, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Richards. I agree with Commissioner Fay, but I'd also like just to clarify here and just read from Article 10, which is building demolition of the ordinance, and the definition section, historically significant building or structure, number 4 says any principal or accessory building or structure which is or has been designated by the commission to be a significant building or structure because either A, it is importantly associated with one or more historic persons or events, or with the broad architectural, cultural, political, economic, or social history of the city or the Commonwealth, or B, it is historically or architecturally significant, and parentheses, in terms of period, style, method of building construction, or association with the famous architect or builder, close parentheses, either by itself or in the context of another building or a group of buildings, such as a neighborhood streetscape or farm complex. So this, the conversation that the abutters are presenting to us is a valid one and needs to be considered. And it may even dominate the discussion about this particular property within that streetscape. So we don't know yet, because it hasn't been presented formally, what is proposed here. But I would say that as we look at what is to be proposed, or what is proposed for the changes to the structure, that we be aware of the neighborhood historical streetscape. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And as I'm sure you all know, but just to remind you once again, if it is determined to either not be historically significant or not considered for preservation, then that is the end of the story, and we do not have any further oversight into what the developmental plans may or may not be. Is someone prepared to make a motion that we can take a vote on to that effect? Sounds like people. I thought I heard somewhat of a, not exactly a consensus, but a couple of concurring opinions there anyway.
I'll make a motion that we find it historically significant and considered for preservation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fay. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that. This is Peter.
That's Peter. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so we'll go around our roll again. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. A second. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Peter, back to me.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair will go along with that. So, so we have voted that it is historically significant and considered for preservation, which means that we will have a public hearing for the demo plan review and etc. So with that, we can turn it back over to Attorney Mead, I assume, and Ms. Graff, the architect, to address those issues or that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I would like to do is a couple of things. We do have plans, as you know, we put them in the package, and I think they're part of this presentation, although there we go. Here's what I want to say about what we have proposed. Since we have proposed this, the buyers, my clients, have carefully read the comments from the neighbors, and they have become much more familiar with the neighborhood, and they have asked Eileen and I, or Eileen in particular, to go back and take a look at what they had originally requested, and to try to address some of the concerns that they have heard from the neighbors. And so I'm going to show you these plans because we have them in the package. It's a 2.5, I mean, it's a 1.5 story addition on top, so it becomes a 2.5 story house. As you can see, the front porch stays intact, and the footprint doesn't change. What I would like to know is, and I don't think you need to comment on these plans because they're going to be changed. But I think I've heard from the commission, and I'd like you to tell me if I'm incorrect, that you would like to continue somewhat the streetscape, acknowledging that there are particularly the bungalows at the lower part of the street. Obviously, this is a transition part of the street, the house next door. If you could go up, Andy, to, I think it's photo 6 or 7. Slide 6 or 7. maybe 6.
Yeah, try 6. There you go.
There we go. So this clearly is a transition part of the street. We have this house, the yellow house next door, and then the medical building is beyond that. So, given what has occurred to the house, obviously nobody's here to build replicas of what exists. We're not Disney World. But there is a transition here in this part of the house street. Across the street, I don't have photos from across the street, but across the street, the housing styles are varied, to say the least, from that beautiful house in the corner of Toppins and Highland to a couple of ranches to a couple of colonials. So there's a great mix of houses on the other side of the street as well. So with that, if there's any other comments the board thinks would be helpful to us, or the commission thinks would be helpful to us, other than what has occurred, we will be off to take into consideration that which we have heard from the neighbors.
Yeah, I just have 2 quick comments, Attorney Mead. One is that, so to make sure I understand you correctly, that since the plans will probably change somewhat, we would not be taking any kind of a vote on the current plans. Did I hear you correctly on that?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
I mean, I presume, if the board wants to approve those plans, that would be great. That, of course, was what my client originally requested.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be likely.
Okay. The second thing is, we've had a couple of cases, and I know my fellow commissioner, Mr. Morgan, will be interested in this discussion, that where we're building upward on an existing structure because of low ceiling heights and that sort of thing. And there's been, concern about has a structural engineer been engaged to determine with any degree of reasonable certainty that the bones of the house, so to speak, that the structure that is existing on the first floor and foundation and whatever is going to be fully capable of the additional load that is expected?
Well, so I'm not going to speak for Eileen, but most of the engineers, architects that I work with engage structural engineers when they do redesigns of houses, particularly on this. And with all due respect to the commission and the expertise on the commission, I don't believe the commission has the authority to determine building code issues.
No.
So I'm happy to have Eileen address that question. I believe that if she adds floors on top of buildings, she engages structural engineers, as do the other architects that I work with.
Right.
I can add a little if you'll just give me a moment. So it does actually, we have not brought an engineer yet for that analysis, but if I could speak to the original structure, and again, why I think it is a sound idea to just raise the roof and keep the existing first floor level. It's pretty sound structure. The part that's actually probably the least sound is the fact that they tried at some point to occupy that second floor, which was just meant for attic space. So technically it's that floor system that they're using that was never meant to be a floor system that I actually have the most concern with, and the lopsided dormering of it makes me question the integrity of the roof, so if there's any area that's unstable, it would be that top level,
Right.
not the foundation or the walls. That actually seems sound.
Okay. And just so that we're all clear, I certainly am aware, Attorney Mead, that this commission has nothing to do with enforcement of zoning and those sorts of things. But I'm sure you also remember that due to some recent unfortunate events that took place in the city, such as Harrison Ave, there is an increased, awareness and sensitivity to this particular issue. So that, I'm sure you understand why it gets raised as a question. Okay, so it sounds like you would like to at least begin the discussion about what you plan to do, and then and then continue to a future meeting for a more final discussion. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
we'd like to continue to your next meeting. But I do, if there's any other comments other than what has already been made by the commission, we'd like to hear them.
Well, I had a couple questions that what you can do is since you'll be back again, you could answer. Andy, can you go up to, I think it's on slide 4 would probably be a good one that shows the 4 depictions. Okay, this is existing conditions. Is there, so maybe it's 11 that's got the, okay, could, on these, and think this, I assume this would really be for Ms. Graff. You've got these various markers for the, I forgot again what the top of this and various things, and they're given as, you know, elevations like above sea level or something. I don't know. It would be very helpful to us to actually, you know, have what the a measurement from grade, so that rather than try to figure out, okay, if the first floor is at 100 feet and then, you know, top of first floor finished, you know, 109 feet. Okay, so that's the 9 foot. You know what I mean? It would just be, it would be nice to, like, actually in this case, I do see you have the 9 feet there, but on those, rather than elevations above sea level or whatever it is, just have, you know, and then maybe in addition elevation from grade. It makes it easier for us to picture everything.
But that's it. So if I could speak to that, it's a little difficult when sometimes that grade moves on you.
Yes.
So as you go front to back, the property does go downhill. So
Yeah,
there
I
is-
understand.
that reference point's always changing. And sort of traditionally, that first floor is the sort of marker, or that, as you referenced, sea level. So everything is relative to that as a change in vertical height.
Yeah. So if you want to use that top of first finished floor there, that second one from the bottom as kind of as a convenient reference point, that would be fine. And also, there isn't any. I didn't see any indication of the ridge height in any of these.
So can I, again, the city of Newburyport measures building height by mean, height.
I'm aware of
And
that.
right, so in your regulations and the ordinance doesn't say anything about changing the measurements of any of the things that are already required under the zoning ordinance. So we always show building height because it's a defined term in the ordinance. And similarly, as Eileen was explaining, that's done by a calculation, which is also defined in the ordinance. And so that way everything is consistent and looked at the same way with the same definition. So we're all speaking the same terminology.
Yeah.
And and if I could add to that, actually, if I could give clarity to the existing drawings and the building height. So when we work and coordinate these drawings that are presented to you, you know, we're working in unison with the surveyors. So oh, sorry, hold on one second. Hold on.
While we're paused there, let me just clarify for the applicant and their attorney and architect that I was making a request. It's not a demand that contrary to law or ordinance or whatever. It's a request. If you decide you would rather not accede to the request, that's up to you.
I'm sorry. I was having a little panic there. I had my, sorry, apologies. My IT guy was just fixing something on my computer right when I was about to present it. It threw me for a loop that somebody was moving things on my computer. So apologies there. So if I could go back to what I was saying, I'm sorry to leave you hanging. The existing drawing, if I could reference that in regards to the building height. So going back to that dimension that's given when we give the building height, thank you. So that is as described in the definition in our ordinance. It's a mean to mean. And that dimension is measured from the surveyor. It's an average of the corners of the building in relation to grade, and then from eave to ridge. So I just wanted to point that out just to give some clarity, as I noted some confusion in some of the correspondence on where that dimension comes from. So that's an instrument measured dimension from the surveyor.
Okay, and you may have missed it because you stepped away, Ms. Graff, that what I was making a request, not a demand, to help the commissioners, and in many, it's quite common to also give even ridge heights, just even though it might not be legally required, and it is helpful to us. That's all. I see two hands up from our commissioners here. When I start with Mr. Fay, did you have a comment to make?
Well, I just had a question. I guess at this point in the process, what are we being asked? Because what I've heard is we would like to hear from the commission what they think. And then when we say what we think or what we suggest, we're then told that we're not allowed to say that. So to me, let me finish. That to me, that would mean that the discussion is moot. There's no point in proceeding with the discussion. We should just close this conversation down, and I would make a motion to do so if the chair feels that that's the appropriate action. That's all. We can all see the plans, and we may have opinions, and we've been asked for our opinions, and then we're told, well, you have no authority to do that. And it's like a broken record sometimes.
With all due respect, Mr. Fay, I didn't say anything about the chair's opinion. He was asking for a measurement that's not consistent with the ordinances, which is different than an opinion about the design.
But he asked about the structural thing, and then there was, it's like, we're either going to move forward with this, or we're just going to get locked. It's too late in the evening to get locked into a discussion on, are we going to move this process forward? That's all. I mean, if I were to offer my opinion, since I have the floor, it appears that the original house has been lost in the proposed design. So while we've talked about, we're not tearing down the original house, but we're subsuming the original house, is what appears to be the case, in something that goes up, I guess, 3 stories. And the comment was made earlier by Attorney Mead that it looked like an engine, which it does. But that whole structure sort of gets lost in this whole thing. So that would be my opinion, and my suggestion is to tone it down. It doesn't appear to be consistent with the neighborhood, even though the neighborhood appears to move, up the hill a little bit with slightly elevated roof lines. So I'll cede my rest of my time to Mr. Moore.
I appreciate those comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, Joe, you've had your hand up for a while too.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Fay again, but I just wanted to make an observation, simply that the proposed changes are, I think, are excessive relative to the original structure. I think that there's a compromise solution here. I'm always sympathetic to someone wanting to get livable space from an attic. I mean, that. I understand that. That's a hardship, but I believe that can be done here very easily without going up and doing the 2.5 story version that is being proposed. So I just feel that they're trying to put too much here, and I think that actually corresponds to what the neighbors are saying too. So I think there's actually a compromise solution, and I think that's what Attorney Mead is suggesting, that they're going to try to find that and present that to us at the next meeting. So that's what I'm hoping.
Thank you very much. That's the goal.
Yeah. Any other comments from my fellow commissioners? And don't forget to put your hand down, Joe. I'll add my opinion to that of Mr. Morgan there, that I feel similarly. I guess this is addressed to mainly, the architect and the applicant, that it does. At first, it didn't quite appear. It looked like you were going to take the height of that back thing and back addition and bring it forward, but it's really quite a bit more than that. It's overall significantly higher, and it's going to loom pretty large, or at least that's how it seems in my unprofessional opinion here. Now you had a presentation. Do you still feel it would be worthwhile to go through any more of that presentation, Attorney Mead?
No, I think that this is what we were looking for, because there will be changes. There's no need to continue on with that.
Okay. Since I think that I should allow the public comment period, because we did open a public hearing on the demo plan review. And and I know a lot of people did come in tonight hoping to be heard. So I want to be fair to them. So let's see if we can do that expeditiously, especially given that this application will be back in a couple of weeks at our next meeting. If you want to wait to express something, then that's fine. If you have a public comment that you think the applicant and their architect and could benefit from hearing, this might be a good time to make that known. So I'll just open a brief public hearing segment. So if you want to make a public comment, please use the function to raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, that's what was it, Andy, star 9, I believe.
Correct. Yep.
So I'll just allow a few seconds. It looks like I'm not seeing any raised hands. Oh, there is one. Looks like Mr. Amos.
Thank you very much. I agree with the board's comments. My concerns are definitely with the height of the structure. I also agree with the comment that would be extremely helpful for us as neighbors. While I know it is not a requirement for the application that the ridge heights be given, I think it helps those of us looking at the plans and also the commission to see the existing roof height, the proposed ridge height of the new building, and also in comparison to the ridge heights of the abutting buildings on both sides. When I looked at the plans, it appeared to me that the new structure would actually be over the height of the existing chimney, but it's hard to tell that because the plans are not exactly clear. So as a neighbor, I would appreciate that information, even if it's not required to be given, so that I could understand the plans better.
All right, thank you very much. Any other public comment? I'm not seeing any at the moment. I'll give just a couple seconds, and if not, going once, going twice. Okay, I will close the public comment period. And the chair would like to hear a motion to continue the application without prejudice to our next meeting, which would be, let's look at the calendar here real quick.
22nd.
Yes, the 22nd day of April. Is there such a motion?
This is Joe, so moved.
Okay, so there's a motion to continue to, hang on a second here, to, for 22, is that seconded?
Second it.
Okay, is that Mark, right?
Yep.
Okay, so go through the roll. Mr. Centron?
Yes.
Okay, hang on a second here, I gotta get the right keys. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, and the chair goes along with that. So that motion carries. So the applicant will return Creek Don't Rise, etc. on April 22 for continuation of the demo plan review, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you too. We'll see you then.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Going back to the agenda here, which, as you can see, if you're seeing the video of the Zoom, we have one more major item on the agenda, another demolition delay hearing. It's or application consideration. It's for 22-24 Auburn Street. And do we have someone here that's going to speak to that?
Yes, this
Like-
is Landers Symes.
Okay, thank you, Landers. So, yeah, I don't really have much of a preamble to say on this one. I'll let you go ahead and explain what it is
Okay, I'm sorry.
you're here for.
So we've purchased this dwelling in the land surrounding it. And we are looking to demo it and replace it with new single family homes, or a single family home and a duplex on lot 2. The land was before the planning board last night, and an A&R plan was signed to make the property 2 lots. And we're looking to demo the existing dwelling. It's in pretty bad shape. Mr. Fay's comments from the first hearing were kind of my thoughts when I walked through the home the first time. The first floor has been abandoned and maybe have been used for some type of commercial purpose. It looks like if you are facing the house, which is the front elevation is shown on that photo. Now to the left is some type of greenhouse or maybe sun porch that is falling off, and the whole first floor has been abandoned and is in pretty rough shape. The second floor was occupied, I think, just prior to our purchasing it, and hard to believe that somebody was living up there. So it's an old kind of decrepit building.
Okay, and I can confirm from my own personal recollection that it was a commercial space.
Okay.
I can recall there was, fortunately, it's been a while, so perhaps the odor is gone, but it used to be a fish market.
Oh, no, it doesn't seem, you know what, that might make sense. It did look like there had been some freezers and stuff in there, although it did not smell.
Okay,
I didn't smell bait or anything.
all right, good. That's for the better. All right, so just summing up, so the plan is to demolish that structure, and I think you saw what Andy showed just a minute ago. Yeah, that that kind of, could you go back to that plan, Andy, that whatever slide it was that showed the overall kind of the plot plan that showed the layout and how they want to, when to put the, just so that everyone can understand what the plan is here. Okay, so it's that. So I assume that the solid lines here in that rather skinny triangle are, that was one lot, I take it?
So yes, the whole large triangle was a single lot.
Right.
And the square, yeah, there's a lot line right in there, correct.
Okay.
And those large squares where it says lot 1 and lot
Right.
2,
Right.
those are requirements of the planning board to show that you have certain dimensions that fit within a lot.
Right. Okay. So to show that you actually have room to build in there.
Correct.
Okay. And okay. That's out of my own curiosity. Any plans for what to do with that little point of the slice, the pie slice there toward the end of Auburn Street there?
So that's actually restricted, part of the taking when Route 1 was built. So there can be nothing put in there. It doesn't call it a line of sight easement, but I would say it's kind of similar to that.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. Okay, any questions from my fellow commissioners on this particular application? The task before us is to determine if this structure is historically significant and preferably preserved or not. Any questions for Mr. Symes or comments or anything? And just so I'm clear, Mr. Symes, are you one of the new owners, or do you represent them from a attorney's firm, or?
No. I am the manager of Symes Development and Permitting, and we're from Symes Associates in Beverly, and we are builder developers.
Okay.
So I am the owner.
The guy. Okay.
I am the guy. Right.
All right, thank you. Okay. No comments. No questions.
No.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, you had something?
I just wanted to know if there's any historical pedigree here. I mean, I know it's on the district data sheets, but what I see here doesn't correspond to either a federal or a Greek revival. So I don't really understand what I'm looking at here in terms of a historical structure. It's listed as 1810, but I don't know. You know, was I looking at the wrong address? It doesn't have a Form B, so there's no other detail on it, I suppose. But is
What
it
was it?
historical? Has it ever been historical?
What was it listed as,
So-
Joe, on that sheet?
But our understanding it was built in 1938, and so we exceeded the 75-year criteria. And actually, this had been granted a demo permit earlier on a previously approved project that was never built.
Do you know how long
I'm
ago
not
that
saying,
was?
but I don't think it was. I'm sorry, I don't want to misstate this. I don't think it was given a demo permit by you. I think that was applied for prior to it hitting its 75-year anniversary.
I see. Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, I don't see a federal or Greek revival house either, Joe. I don't know if either it was the wrong address or it's been like completely something.
It's a mess inside. It's been reframed. There's been roofs added and moved, so I suppose it's possible.
Yeah, and then it looks like is it sitting on a slab? It looks like it is.
Yes, sir. It's a slab.
Yeah, so that wouldn't really typically that wouldn't be the case with a house that age either. Okay, any other questions? I notice your hand is still up, Joe. Were you finished? Okay, it's no longer up. Any other questions or comments from my peers here on the board? If not, would anyone dare to make a motion? I know you're thinking about it. I can smell something burning.
Glenn, I'll make a motion. This is Chris, that it is not historically significant.
Okay, does
at all.
Does that have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go around the horn here. Mark?
Yes.
Okay. Christopher?
Yes.
Okay, Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Joe Morgan?
Yes. This is 14, right? 14
No,
Auburn?
22-24 Auburn Street.
22. Okay. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, you good?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what that means is that you are will be at liberty to get a demolition permit. Now, I know that there are some folks still in the, I didn't have a public hearing or hear from the public on that decision, but I see there are some folks in attendance, at least one of whom I recognize as an abutter. If you have any concerns about what the Mr. Symes and his company is planning to do, let's see, Landers, will you be before? I know you were before the planning board just last night about that lot change, or either you or maybe Andy knows. Will they be before will have to come before any board for any approval of their development plans?
Well, the two-family use would be before the zoning board of appeals.
Okay. Okay. All right. Is that in like a non-conforming use or something?
No, it's just in that district. It's required as a special permit.
Okay. All right. So, so what I'm trying to say is that if you have concerns about any of that, that will come before, at least for that purpose, before the ZBA, and they will, you'll be able to express your opinion, pro, con, or whatever at that opportunity. Okay. So, Mr. Symes, I assume you understand what that means for you?
Yes, it sounds like we can move forward with getting the demolition permit off and running, and I understand the whole permitting process on the rest of it.
Yeah, I would imagine. Okay, yep, and that is correct. So thank you very much. And I believe the only thing left on the agenda, the updates.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. I don't think I have any updates tonight. The only thing I mentioned by way of update from the chair is that we are continuing to pursue the action on the grant for the updating of uh, the Form Bs and the contributing properties list and so on. I have asked the Mass Historical Commission for some guidance as far as what they expect from the scope of work and so on. I haven't heard back yet, so we're continuing to work on that. I know that they do have some deadlines on various things to take place. I don't mean to put you on the spot here. And you don't happen to know what the deadline is for the scope of work to be in, do you?
When you say scope, we have not yet advertised the procurement yet. So we have a time frame here, the year-long process with the grant funds, if that's your question. But, we have to go through all those steps. So there's not a specific date yet. But once we have something together that we feel we're comfortable with, we would then send that scope of work out, advertise it, solicit proposals from the consultants, rank them and pick the one that we wanted to use, of course. And then enter into a contract. So, I mean, it's a process that plays out, but there isn't a specific date if that's what your question is.
Okay. All right. So all I would ask for you guys and would be guys being a unisex term, think about ways in which you might help, because what we're going to try to do is save some time and money, hopefully, on the expert consultants that are hired to help us with the Form Bs and so on by pre-identifying the the low-hanging fruit, if you want to use that expression, or the likely suspects, a few different analogy, those properties that since that last was done, which is the early 80s, nearly 30 years or about 30 years have gone by. So there are more properties that are older, and plus there may have been some that were missed when that first round was done. So we want to identify the properties that we feel are most in need of protection. Okay, so that's it from me. We can hopefully you've had a chance to review the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the draft minutes?
So moved.
Okay, that sounds like
Peter?
Mr. McNamee. Yes,
Yep.
Thank you, Peter. Is that seconded?
I'll
This is
second.
Joe. I second that.
I'll second that, Chris. I'll second that.
All right, 2 seconds. Okay, Mr. Syndrome.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fay.
It's getting crazy.
What was that? Chris Fay, did you vote on the minutes?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Peter McNamee.
Yeah.
I am.
What?
Getting a delay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and myself. Okay, and finally, if there's nothing else that anyone needs to say, we can take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move to adjourn. This is Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Is that seconded?
I second that. This is Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, again, Mark Central.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, Chris.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Peter.
Yes.
Okay, Joe.
No. I mean, yes.
You just okay, yes.
Yes.
You weren't really confused, were you? Okay, well, that ends tonight's meeting. I guess it's only 8, not even 8:30 yet. We shouldn't be punchy at this stage of the game. So thank you all for your attendance. Thank you, board members, for your diligence on this and patience. And we'll speak again, meeting again in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.